WhatsApp co-founder John Koum is a billionaire today, but his journey to the top was far from easy. He was born to a poor family in Ukraine and had to struggle a lot in his early life. When he moved to the United States with his mother, he had to work odd jobs to make ends meet, and he even had to live on food stamps at one point in his life. But how did John, a poor boy from Ukraine, become one of the richest men in the world? Today's video is an inspiring story of hard work, dedication, and consistency. Koum was born in a tiny hamlet outside of Kiev to Ukrainian parents. He was the only child in his family, and his mother was a housewife, while his father worked as a construction worker. When John was just 7 years old, the Soviet Union collapsed and life in Ukraine became very difficult. There was no food, no jobs, and no future. There was also no hot water in the house, and his parents avoided talking on the phone for fears of being tapped by the government. At the age of 16, John and his mother immigrated to the United States in 1992 as refugees, and they settled in Mountain View, California. They settled in a 2-bedroom apartment which they were able to acquire through government assistance. In order to save money, Koum's mother stuffed their suitcases full of pens and a stack of Soviet-issued notebooks. John would later use these supplies for his schoolwork in high school. While schooling, he worked as a janitor and a grocery store clerk and even sold used books. Koum learned to speak English, but he didn't like the flighty nature of American high school relationships. He was used to the close-knit bond in Ukraine where you see the same people for 10 years. He himself said, "You really learn about a person." His father intended to join John and his mother after they were settled, but he died before he could do so. 3 years later, John's mother also passed away from cancer, and since his mom could no longer work, they survived off of her disability allowance. He taught himself network engineering by buying manuals from a used bookstore and returning the books as soon as he was done. He went to San Jose University to study computer science and mathematics, and while he was in school, he also joined internet networking organizations and hacker groups called Yahoo and dived into the servers of Silicon Graphics and chatted with Napster co-founder Sean Fanning. John started working as a security tester for Ernst & Young, and after being employed for 6 months, he was given the opportunity of a lifetime when he was hired as an infrastructure engineer at Yahoo. In 1997, he was sitting across a desk from Brian, who was a Yahoo employee, to inspect the company's advertising system. When Acton recalls his first encounter with John, he said, "You could tell he was a bit different. He was very no-nonsense, like, what are your policies here? What are you doing here?" He says that other Ernst & Young employees were going with the touchy-feeling tactics, such as giving bottles of wine. "Whatever," says Acton, "let's cut to the chase." As it turns out, Koum also liked Brian's no-nonsense personality too. "Neither of us has an ability to bullshit," says Koum. While still in school, one of Yahoo's servers broke, and David Philo, the co-founder of Yahoo, called John on his mobile phone. "I'm in class," Koum answered discreetly. "What the fuck are you doing in class?" Philo said. "Get your ass in the office." David only had a small team of engineers and he needed as much help as possible. "I hated school anyway," Koum says, and then he later dropped out. Brian and Koum watched the ups and downs of Yahoo for the next 9 years. Action invested in the dot-com boom only to lose millions during the 2000 crash, and even then he already disliked advertising. He was getting pulled into Yahoo's launching advertising platform called Project Panama in 2006. "Dealing with ads is depressing," Brian says now. "You don't make anyone's life better by making advertisements work better." He was emotionally drained. Koum says he could see it on Brian in the hallways. John, who was also unhappy with how things were going, describes his last years of working at Yahoo with "did some work" on his LinkedIn profile. Eventually, John became bored working at Yahoo. He felt that there was no scope for creativity and innovation. He later quit Yahoo at 31 years old and used the time off to travel around the world with his ex-coworker who resigned alongside him. Brian Acton and John Koum, former employees of Yahoo, decided that they wanted to create something new. They both applied for jobs at Facebook but were rejected. Another chapter of John's life unfolded when he purchased an iPhone. He was quick to recognize the software store's potential, and he started working on an app. He wanted to create something that would simplify communication and interaction. John envisioned developing an app that could display statuses next to the user's name. In order to make it a reality, they needed a reliable iOS developer. With assistance from John's friend and restaurant owner Alex Fishman, they talked about this concept for hours. John was showing me his address book, recalls Fishman, and his thinking was it would be really cool to have statuses next to individual names of the people. The statuses would show if you were on a call, or your battery was low, or if you were at the gym. Alex then introduced both of them to a Russian developer named Igor Solomenikov, and history was made. The app was then called WhatsApp. Koum chose the name WhatsApp because it sounded like "What's up?" When they first started, everything was difficult. Trying to create a company with no money was proving to be quite a challenge. The money that he had saved from Yahoo was already gone from his travels and other expenses, so they had no other choice but to build it from scratch with no financial aid. With the experience and knowledge he had acquired from working at Yahoo, John spent weeks writing the back-end code of the app. He had to make sure it could sync the app with all the phone numbers globally. He spent countless hours poring over a Wikipedia entry that had the list of all international dial prefixes, and he spent months updating it due to regional nuances. In the early days of WhatsApp, the application kept crashing and getting stuck. When Alex installed the app on his phone, there were only hundreds of numbers in his contact list that had also downloaded it. At Tony Roma's in San Jose, Fishman went over the problems in detail when Koum took notes. In those days, no one wanted to invest in their idea because it was unproven. They had a lot of doubts and no one to rely on but each other. The next month, after Koum and Acton played frisbee, John admitted that he should probably call it quits and start looking for a job. But Brian wasn't happy with John's drop in motivation. "You'd be an idiot to quit now," he said. "Give it a few more months." Things started to change when Apple launched push notifications in June of 2009. It allows developers to ping users when they aren't on the app. Koum updated WhatsApp so that every time the user changed their status, it would notify everyone in your network. Alex's Russian friends used the app to ping their network with their jokey custom status, such as "I woke up late" or "I'm on my way." Fishman says it became instant messaging. We started using it as "Hey, how are you?" and then somebody would reply. Koum slowly observed the changing statuses on his Mac Mini in Santa Clara, and when he realized that he had created a messaging service, he said, "Being able to reach someone halfway across the world instantly on a device that is always with you was powerful." During this time, the only free texting service was BlackBerry's BBM, but it didn't work with other phones. Google's Gtalk and Skype were also there, but WhatsApp stood uniquely because your login was your cell phone number. When John released WhatsApp 2.0, now with a messaging component, the active users reached to over 250,000. When the app started to show some potential, he went to see Brian, who was still unemployed and in the air of another startup idea that had no future. They sat at Brian's kitchen table and began sending messages to each other on the app. During this time, it already had the famous double check mark that tells the sender whether the recipient had received the message or not. Brian realized he was staring at a potentially greater SMS experience for users. He said, "You had the whole open-ended bounty of the internet to work with." John and Brian worked at the Red Rock Cafe where most startup founders stay. The second floor of the cafe is full of people glued to their laptop screens on top of wobbly tables, writing code in silence. This is where they would work. Brian is writing notes and John is on his laptop. A few months later, Brian convinced 5 of his ex-Yahoo co-workers to invest $250,000 as seed funding. He was then given the co-founder status and a stake. On the 1st of November, Brian officially joined the company. The two tech co-founders have a combined stake of 60%, which is a large number for a startup in tech. Koum had the largest share because he started the idea 9 months before Brian joined the company. The two tech founders were getting swarmed with emails from iOS users. All were keen on the concept of WhatsApp having international free texting, wanting to communicate with their friends who were using Nokias and Blackberries. John hired Chris Pfeiffer, an old friend, to make the BlackBerry version of WhatsApp. At first, Chris was skeptical because people already have SMS, but John explained that people's text messages mattered in various countries. It's a dead technology like a fax machine left over from the 70s, sitting there as a cash cow for carriers. When Chris looked at the numbers, he immediately joined. With the help of their Yahoo network, Brian and Acton found a startup subleasing cubicles in a warehouse on Evelyn Avenue. The other half of the converted warehouse was rented by Evernote, who would later kick them out of the building. For warmth, they wore blankets and they used cheap IKEA tables for work. When they first started, they did not even have a WhatsApp sign for their office, so their directions were find the Evernote building, go around the back, find an unmarked door, and knock, says Michael Donahue, one of WhatsApp's first BlackBerry engineers, recalling his first interview. Koum and Acton had to work for free in the first few years of WhatsApp. Their earliest cost was sending verification text to their users. They were using cutthroat SMS brokers such as Clickatel, who would send a text to the US for 2 cents. However, in the Middle East, it would cost 65 cents. Currently, the SMS verification is around $500,000 a month. And of course, the expenses weren't so expensive back then, but it was high enough to drain John's accounts. Thankfully, around this time, WhatsApp was bringing in revenue at $5,000 a month in 2010, which was enough to pay for the costs. From time to time, Brian and John had to switch the app from free to paid to prevent the company from growing too fast. In December of 2009, they updated the app for iPhone users to allow them to send photos, which increased the growth even when users had to pay $1. You know, I think we can actually stay paid, Acton told Koum. In early 2011, WhatsApp was in the top 20 of all applications in the App Store, and even with the popularity that WhatsApp got, he wasn't crowing to the press about it. He believes that marketing and press kick up dust. It gets in your eye, and then you're not focused on the product. Of course, venture capitalists didn't need the media to inform them that WhatsApp was going viral. The two co-founders were declining all the requests to talk.
VCs started coming to us and they're like, you guys are doing great, we want to partner with you, we want to give you money, and we're like, we don't really need it, which makes them want to invest even more.
And Brian saw BC funding as a bailout. However, Sequoia partner Jim Getz didn't want to give up. He spent 8 months calling and negotiating with his contacts to either get Brian or John to engage. He would meet tons of other companies such as Pinger, Beluga, and Tago, but WhatsApp was the clear leader. Jim was also surprised the company was already paying off its corporate income taxes. After much persistence, he sat down with Brian at a Red Rock cafe, promising not to push advertising models on them, but instead to act as their strategic advisor. Eventually, they both agreed to take $8 million from Sequoia on top of their $250,000 seed funding. In February of 2013, WhatsApp had over 200 million active users and 50 staff members. The two co-founders agreed to raise more money, and discreetly they held a second funding round to which Sequoia would invest another $50 million, which would value WhatsApp at $1.5 billion. Even though Facebook is the most popular social network app, Mark considered WhatsApp as competition. A year after Sequoia invested $50 million, Mark Zuckerberg invited Koum to dinner in his home and gave him a deal to join Facebook's board. Over a week later, John signed a Facebook deal valued at $19 billion.
Facebook has bought the mobile messaging service WhatsApp for $19 billion in cash and stock. And
in 2015, WhatsApp became the most popular instant messaging app, and from then on, there was no looking back. To this day, the number of users is constantly growing, and it became the go-to communication tool for companies and individuals. After a year of going fully encrypted, the app was updated with a business model made specifically for companies. Businesses can create their accounts and use the features for free. After Facebook purchased WhatsApp, Brian and John left WhatsApp in 2017. Brian Acton stepped down as a member of Facebook's board, and John left because of data privacy concerns with the app's new business model. Now in 2022, there are over 2 billion users on WhatsApp worldwide. While the original founders are no longer a part of the company, their innovation has impacted the world in ways we never thought possible. We'll end the video with one of John's popular quotes: "I want to do one thing and do it well." If there's anything we've learned from John Koum's life story, it's that if you're passionate about something and you stick to it, success will eventually follow. If this video inspired or moved you in any way, please share it with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more success stories. And as always, thank you for watching.